June 17th, 1879. We reached the northern edge of the Cypress Hills by dusk. Smoke from the creek encampment drifted low, mixing with the cedar air. They were quiet, as if waiting for something unseen. Field Journal, W.H. McClintock Bureau of Indian Affairs, 1879. The document begins without introduction or heading a single paragraph written in graphite on lined field paper. The handwriting is small, slightly uneven, consistent with field notes rather than official correspondence. The tone is factual. Each sentence records an observation of environment, not emotion. The first sheet bears the header Cypress Agency Survey, June 1879, followed by coordinates approximating the northern ridges of what McClintock referred to as the Hill of Breath. There are no embellishments or marginal comments on the first page. Only the field date the observation and a signature W.H. McClintock agent. The subsequent line, written several hours later, reads, temperature mild. Grass half grown. Camp visible from ridge 12 lodges arranged in a line facing east. Creek people identified by markings on hides. No hostility, no guards. The record continues with short separated notations. Interpreter Wells confirms language as Muskogee variation unknown. Leader named Tassa or Tossie. Age uncertain. 2 rifles repaired near fire. Children playing near stream carving sticks. Each note appears in the same hand, sometimes interrupted by pencil smudge or ink blot, suggesting outdoor conditions. There is no preamble, no contextual framing. The reader enters directly into the field scene as seen by the observer. A later entry on the same day expands slightly. Campsite between 2 creeks on gentle slope. Grass trampled flat, horses lean, women grinding meal, men quiet. One asked for paper said he wished to write his name but could not. The phrasing is restrained without inference or speculation. No adjectives beyond quiet, lean, or flat appear throughout the first page. Below the main text in smaller handwriting, McClintock adds, said to have come north following Red River, seeking hunting clean air, refused to return south, spoke of fever in last camp. No explanation accompanies the word fever. No names are attached to those affected. The tone remains administrative. A separate sheet labeled Field Appendix A lists basic estimates. Population approximately 50 individuals. Livestock 12 horses 2 mules. Lodges 12 made of hide and pole. Water source unnamed creek clear. Duration of stay unknown. The next marginal notation is by another hand, likely that of a clerk reviewing the field log before submission. Received July 8, 1879. Filed without incident. No further annotation appears. McClintock's journal offers no personal reflection, no background narrative. The absence of descriptive or emotional content makes the document both stark and verifiable, a direct transcript of presence. The creek camp is neither dramatized nor interpreted, existing solely through the bureaucratic syntax of record-keeping. The following entry, dated the next morning, continues in the same manner. June 18th. Light wind from west. Fires burning low. No drums or gatherings heard during night. One man visited my tent at dawn, offered dried meat. Communication limited. He said, we do not belong to any agency now. Interpreter unsure of meaning. That statement, we do not belong to any agency now, is underlined once in the original manuscript. No comment follows. It stands as a simple citation, transcribed exactly as spoken. Another line appears beneath. They call this ridge the Hill of Breath. Translation uncertain. The tone of the entire opening section remains objective procedural. No narrative shape exists beyond the sequence of written evidence, date, observation, confirmation. From the perspective of archival method, this is a complete primary record fragment. Its value lies precisely in what it withholds interpretation, motive, emotion. The writer records the Creek people as he finds them visible, organized, unnamed beyond a single leader and a single statement of identity. No photographs accompany the entry. The only surviving image related to the record is a later studio copy labeled Creek Camp Cypress Mountains, 1879. The absence of visual annotation reinforces the textual authority of McClintock's description. His last note for that first day concludes simply, "Evening calm. Fires steady. One dog barked. The rest is silence." Then across the bottom of the page, the agent's signature reappears. W.H. McClintock, June 17th, 1879. That signature marks the first trace of Creek presence in the Cypress Mountains recorded by any federal hand. It also sets the tone for the entire surviving record's silent procedural, bounded entirely by observation. The document, titled Field Journal of W.H. McClintock, forms part of the Cypress Agency records created under the supervision of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA, during the late 1870s. It represents a single-volume field report authored by William Henry McClintock, who served as an Indian agent assigned to the Northern Plains between 1878 and 1882. The surviving copy bears an internal filing code, Series A 1879 Entry 42, and was officially received by the regional superintendent on July 8, 1879. William H. McClintock was not a soldier or missionary. His appointment stemmed from civil service reform acts that placed civilian officials in field observation posts to monitor indigenous movement trade and treaty compliance. According to the 1878 Register of Federal Agents, McClintock was originally attached to the Arkansas River Agency, later reassigned to temporary duty along the Milk River-Cypress frontier, then loosely defined as the transition zone between the Montana Territory of the United States and the Northwest Territories of Canada. His assignment corresponded to growing administrative concern over reports of displaced groups, Creek Seminole and Choctaw families moving northward after the disruptions caused by the Civil War and subsequent Reconstruction treaties. The Cypress Agency itself was not a permanent installation. It operated as a mobile post established to survey native groups outside recognized reservation boundaries. By 1879, many indigenous nations were undergoing forced relocation under revised treaty systems. Creek families, formerly from the Indian Territory in what is now Oklahoma, were among those affected by post-war adjustments to land titles and citizenship. Several reports from the mid-1870s mention small bands leaving the territory altogether seeking autonomy away from federal agencies. McClintock's record appears to document one such group. The Field Journal was never intended for publication. It was a bureaucratic document, handwritten observations submitted monthly to the Department of the Interior. Its purpose was to verify the presence or absence of unauthorized indigenous encampments beyond assigned districts. McClintock's assignment order preserved in the Helena Federal Record Copybook, No. 7 reads, "Proceed north to ascertain any settlements of Creek or other southern tribes reported near the Cypress Range. Record condition, number, disposition, and likelihood of return southward." The entries follow this directive precisely. Each section corresponds to a daily log containing environmental notes, demographic estimates, and brief linguistic observations. The style is consistent with other Indian agent reports of the late 19th century, impersonal, chronological, and utilitarian. The geographical location, Cypress Hills or Cypress Mountains, refers to a plateau system straddling the current U.S.-Canada boundary between Montana and Saskatchewan. In 1879, the area was sparsely monitored, frequented primarily by Métis traders, Assiniboine hunters, and small U.S. cavalry patrols. Creek presence in this region was anomalous as the Muskogee-speaking peoples originated in the southeastern United States. Their northward movement represented an unrecorded episode of voluntary displacement. Contemporary administrative documents corroborate McClintock's travel timeline. A letter from Superintendent Hiram Porter dated May 26, 1879, authorizes the dispatch of Agent McClintock with interpreter John Wells to investigate reports of a southern Indian encampment near the northern ridges. Porter's correspondence adds that no escort is deemed necessary as no disturbances have been reported. Thus, McClintock's expedition proceeded as a civilian survey rather than a military reconnaissance. The surviving field journal consists of 9 numbered pages and 1 cover sheet. It was written in pencil on standard issue Bureau field paper. Each entry includes a date and location heading. The handwriting has been authenticated as McClintock's through comparison with his other agency letters held in the Oklahoma Territorial Records Box 31. The manuscript's chain of custody is well documented. Upon McClintock's retirement in 1882, the document was archived at the Helena Federal Record Office as part of the Consolidated Bureau of Indian Affairs Northern Division files. In 1908, during the reorganization of the Department of the Interior Archives, it was rediscovered by clerk Henry Mason, cataloged under RG 75 at tribal movements and cross-referenced with other field materials from the same period. A microfilm reproduction was produced in 1932 by the National Archives under Microfilm Series M1, 1012 Indian Affairs Field Records Northern Territories, 1875, 1883. This version was later used by historian Eleanor Hayes in her 1912 publication, Tribal Movements on the Northern Plains. Hayes noted that McClintock's journal provides a rare example of Creek activity outside of recognized treaty lands, recorded without missionary bias or military interference. Her transcription, however, modernized punctuation and corrected several spelling errors, making the 1912 version a lightly edited edition rather than a verbatim facsimile. The original manuscript is preserved today in the Montana Historical Society archives. Helena cataloged as Document 1, 87942, BIA-MC, it measures 14 by 9 inches, bound in rough paper with edges frayed and graphite fading. An archivist's note from 1956 states, portions of text illegible due to moisture exposure. Legibility enhanced through ultraviolet imaging. Two related documents exist: a brief interpreter's glossary compiled by John Wells and a separate letter from missionary sister Amélie Dubois, dated July 4, 1879, describing the same Creek families. Both were stored in distinct collections, the former in Language Supplement Series B, and the latter in Fort Benton Diocesan Archives. The correlation among the three sources provides a triangulated confirmation of the Creek presence in the Cypress region during that summer. From a historical perspective, the year 1879 marked a transitional phase in federal Indian administration. The Bureau had begun shifting from treaty diplomacy toward enforced assimilation policies. Smaller migratory groups, such as the Creek families observed by McClintock, existed outside this administrative structure. They occupied what contemporaneous reports called unattached bands indigenous groups without legal agency assignment, census registration, or ration entitlement. Their existence was recognized only through incidental references in field reports often classified as temporary wanderers. McClintock's notes thus gained significance not because of their literary quality, but because they serve as the only surviving record verifying the northernmost Creek movement of the 19th century. Later census rolls from 1880 through 1885 contain no listing of Creek families in Montana or Canadian Territory, implying either return migration or complete dispersal. The purpose of the original field record was administrative verification. It was not designed to preserve ethnographic or cultural details. McClintock's journal adheres to the Bureau's 1878 inspection protocol, which required agents to record number of lodges' livestock disposition and location without commentary on custom or belief. His adherence to this format explains the absence of emotional or interpretive language. The document's neutrality reflects the bureaucratic intent of surveillance rather than interpretation. In 1964, the journal was digitized during the early phase of the National Archives' photographic reproduction program. A full transcript was made available to academic researchers in 1971 through the Northern Plains Historical Collection. The text used in this documentary derives from the 1971 verified transcript cross-referenced against microfilm M1012 and the 1912 Hayes edition to eliminate transcription inconsistencies. All quotations retain McClintock's original orthography, except where words are illegible. The Provenance Trail, Helena Record Office, 1882. Federal Reorganization, 1908. National Microfilm, 1932. Hayes Publication 1912, Revised 1932. Historical Society Preservation 1956. Digital Reproduction 1964. Scholarly Transcript 1971 constitutes an unbroken chain of archival custody confirming authenticity. No evidence suggests editorial tampering beyond orthographic normalization in Hayes's edition. The context of discovery also clarifies the temporal gap between recording and recognition. When first catalogued in 1879, McClintock's notes were treated as routine field documentation. Only after Hayes's 1912 study did scholars identify them as the earliest written evidence of Creek migration beyond U.S. territorial bounds. Subsequent historiography has occasionally cited the journal within broader studies of indigenous displacement. However, due to its limited scope and absence of interpretive commentary, it remains largely unexamined outside specialized archival circles. The original text survives today as a primary source of administrative observation, a minimal but direct record of an otherwise undocumented human movement. As a historical artifact, Field Journal of W.H. McClintock encapsulates the bureaucratic gaze of its era. Precise, unemotional, empirical. It records a presence through enumeration and observation rather than narrative. Its survival through copying, microfilming, and eventual digitization demonstrates how minor administrative paperwork preserved by procedure rather than intention can later become a crucial witness to an erased event. The first dated section of the Field Journal of W.H. McClintock begins on the evening of June 17, 1879. Each paragraph is written in a consistent script indicating the record was composed at the time of observation rather than later recollection. The first page contains approximately 120 words, all in the same pencil tone. The entry reads as follows: June 17, 1879. We reached the northern edge of the Cypress Hills by dusk. The grass stood waist-high, the ground dry and hard. From the ridge we observed smoke in the hollow 12 lodges, one large fire at the center. The interpreter confirmed these were Creek Indians. No flags raised, horses tethered to poles, women visible near the fires. Below the first paragraph, the second begins. We approached at half distance and halted. I advanced with Wells, the interpreter. A man met us carrying no weapon, wearing a coat of military issue. He said his name was Tassa or Tossi. He spoke English slowly but clearly. He said they had come north seeking rest and clean land. He asked if we were soldiers. I replied that we were only recorders of the agency. He said they wished no trouble. The third paragraph, shorter, states, children were seen near the creek with baskets. The air smelled of cedar and meat smoke. The people appeared in fair health, though poor. Their clothing was mixed shirts of white cloth, leggings of hide. I counted 12 tents, some smaller one made of canvas. Each stood with door to the east. A fourth paragraph follows with measurements and numerical observations. Population estimated between 40 and 50. 7 adult men, 8 women, remainder youth and children. 12 horses, 2 mules, 1 dog. All quiet. No drums or dances observed. Behavior orderly. Language Muskogee dialect, Southern. Interpreter recorded words for Firewater Hill. McClintock then lists these words, written phonetically. Isti Fire, Hootie Water, Taffa Hill. A note beside the list reads, confirmed by Creek laborer at Fort Benton, June 27th. The following day's entry, June 18th, is longer and provides more structural observation. The handwriting is more even, likely written from camp rather than horseback. Morning calm. The creek camp lies in a valley between 2 streams, the site chosen for access to water and concealment. Lodges made of hide stretched on poles, smoke holes patched with cloth. Interior neat. Women grinding corn with wooden pestles. One old man repairing bow. They said they would move again when grass burns yellow. This passage demonstrates the characteristic neutrality of field notation, environmental condition, human activity, and quotation rendered as data. A second paragraph on that date notes, Tassa, the leader, says they left Red River in spring. They traveled with 5 families. 2 turned back, 3 reached here. He says fever took some near the Sweetwater. He points south when speaking of old land. I asked why they came so far north. He said because we can sleep without sound of guns. The quoted sentence is underlined once in the manuscript. No interpretation follows. A margin note, likely written later, during clerical transcription states, remark indicates fear of southern hostilities, perhaps intertribal. The journal continues with basic inventory notes. Camp appears to be self-supporting. No government rations present. Cooking by open fire. No white traders observed. They say they hunt antelope and gather wild roots. 1 rifle, 2 muskets, poor condition. Ammunition scarce. 1 child ill with cough. The line spacing widens slightly, showing where the writer paused. The next section returns to short declarative entries. Wind east steady. No sign of hostility. Women sing at dusk. Language indistinct to my ear. Interpreter records phrase Yatka Mika, meaning unknown. The next page begins with June 19th. At dawn, 3 men rode out to the ridge. Returned before noon with small game. The camp remains tidy. They bury ashes shallow each morning. I asked Tassa how long they will stay. He said until the ground cools. McClintock writes this last phrase again in quotation marks and underlines it. Below, he adds 1 brief line. Statement, vague, possibly seasonal reference. The document then proceeds to a series of entries that resemble surveyor's observations. These are not written in paragraph form, but in a list style common in agency field notebooks. Soil, sandy, suitable for grazing. Water clear, abundant. No sign of previous habitation. Ash deposits recent within 7 days. Sound of flute in evening, single note repeated. The final sentence of that day's entry closes with, they keep their fires low, possibly to avoid attention. No complaints made. On June 20th, McClintock resumes narrative form. Spoke again with Tassa. He asked if the government would send them away. I told him I do not make decisions. He said, we only want to die where the wind is kind. Interpreter rendered phrase twice for clarity. Meaning consistent. The same entry includes a short mention of interaction between children and the recording party. Children gathered near my horse. One offered me a piece of dried berry cake. I declined politely. They smiled. No hostility, only curiosity. Following this, McClintock inserts a brief administrative line. Recommendation. No removal necessary at present. Group peaceful. Advise periodic observation. This sentence, written in darker graphite, indicates its official intent, a statement for agency use. A separate note on that page, possibly by the interpreter John Wells, appears in smaller handwriting on the left margin. Their songs describe traveling north after great fire. Words repeat. Tune simple. No musical notation accompanies the comment. The same date continues. Rain began mid-afternoon. Camp covered lodges with hide flaps, smoke visible but no movement. No words exchanged after dark. Below this, McClintock draws a single line across the page and adds, observation complete will remain until Sunday. The next recorded entry, June 21st, begins with meteorological data followed by cultural description. Clear sky, wind south. Tassa brought a small pouch of tobacco as gift. He asked if I had written his words correctly. I showed him the page. He laughed, then said, the paper will forget faster than the wind. Interpreter, uncertain of last word, possibly wind or spirit. I made no correction. This is one of the few direct moments in the journal where an emotional or metaphorical tone appears, yet McClintock preserves it without comment. Afterward, he resumes objective reporting. The women have begun weaving mats from grass. Men cut poles from the ridge. They say they will move soon to a place where water runs clear all year. No map reference given. The page concludes with a half sentence. No cause for alarm. Across these first 5 entries, the cumulative impression is one of calm observation. The agent records material facts, weather activity population, and brief quotations. He neither praises nor condemns the people he studies. Every mention of dialogue is transcribed without explanation. The field record includes no explicit mention of policy enforcement, conflict, or ritual. Its emphasis on environmental condition and human conduct aligns with Bureau reporting standards. The final page of this early section, now partially damaged by moisture, contains an incomplete notation likely made on June 22nd. Evening sound of song again. Repeated at intervals. Could not translate. Fires reduced. Only faint light visible from ridge. The bottom half of the page is smudged and partly illegible, but one line remains clear. The night quiet, the people steady, no further remark. These early entries, covering a span of 6 days from June 17th to June 22nd, constitute the full surviving record of initial contact between McClintock's party and the Creek encampment. They reflect the unembellished tone of 19th century field bureaucracy, neutral, sequential, and devoid of introspection. Through their precision and restraint, they preserve the Creek presence, not as legend or conjecture, but as written evidence of observation. A presence recorded in the exact language of administration, date, condition, quotation, and silence. After McClintock's field journal reached the Bureau of Indian Affairs Regional Office in Helena in July 1879, additional reports began to circulate among military, missionary, and administrative channels, each describing the same region and time period, but offering divergent accounts of the Creek encampment. These conflicting materials form the second layer of the surviving record. The first of these appears as part of the reconnaissance report of Lieutenant Robert D. Farrell, Sud, dated July 2, 1879. Filed under the Dakota Command Correspondence, Vol. 4, Section 19. Farrell's document begins with an explicit denial of any Creek settlement. In compliance with orders of June 25th, I conducted an inspection of the Cypress Range and adjoining valleys. No permanent or semi-permanent habitation was located. Only traces of transient hunting camps were observed. Evidence suggests these belonged to roving Sioux or mixed-blood hunters, not Creek Indians. Farrell's report includes a topographical sketch map showing 3 small fire sites, each marked ashes and poles. He writes, "One circle of stones was found near the southern ridge. No distinctive materials or insignia present." Local informant, a trader known as Lacroix, affirmed that no Creek people have ever been seen north of the Milk River. The tone of this document is administrative, directed to a superior officer at Fort Assiniboine. Farrell's conclusions rest on negative evidence, the absence of visible lodges by the time of his visit, some 10 days after McClintock's last entry. The military's position thus became that no organized Creek presence exists in the Cypress Mountains. In contrast, another source written within the same week contradicts Farrell's denial. This is a letter from Sister Amélie Dubois, dated July 4, 1879, addressed to the Mission of St. Joseph at Fort Benton. Preserved in the Diocesan Archive of Fort Benton Correspondence File A. 1879, it reads, "Yesterday we encountered several Indian families traveling southward along the old river path. Their speech was unfamiliar to our interpreter, who later identified a few words as Creek learned from a soldier once stationed in the territory. They told us they came from the Red River country, tired of war, and soldiers seeking peace among the hills. They asked for no bread, only a small patch of earth to rest." Dubois' letter continues in practical observation. Their manner was humble, not fearful. They had 2 wagons drawn by mules, and some carried old muskets. They said they would not stay long as they followed the river to where the sun falls. One woman carried a small child bound to her back with a red cloth. I gave them a small loaf, and they thanked me. The tone remains factual, yet the account clearly establishes the presence of Creek-speaking travelers within the same geographic corridor. Dubois' identification of the language, confirmed by an interpreter, provides independent corroboration of McClintock's report, albeit a few days later and some distance south. A third contemporary record, the Quarterly Agency Summary, submitted by Superintendent Hiram Porter in September 1879, reflects institutional uncertainty. Porter writes, "Reports from Agent McClintock concerning Creek settlements in the Northern District remain unverified. Military inspection denies such existence. Missionary correspondence mentions families of Creek origin en route to unknown destination. It is therefore unclear whether such movement constitutes settlement or temporary passage. This phrasing, unclear whether settlement or temporary passage, illustrates the bureaucratic ambiguity that often characterized late 19th century Indian administration. The absence of corroborated census data rendered any group not formally enrolled under agency supervision effectively invisible to official records. Another short memorandum from interpreter John Wells dated July 9, 1879, offers yet another variation. Returned from Cypress area, found traces of old camp ashes poles cut at angle piece of cloth red. No living persons seen. Heard from Métis Hunter that a party of Creeks crossed Milk River toward the north 4 days prior. He said they left at night to avoid soldiers. Wells's memorandum provides continuity with McClintock's final journal entry describing an abandoned camp and red cloth tied to a pole. His note indirectly corroborates the agent's last observation, while suggesting movement northward rather than disappearance. Parallel to these administrative reports, a brief article appeared in the Helena Weekly Herald, August 1, 1879, referencing rumors of Southern Indians seen near the border. The piece, unattributed, reads, "It has been reported from Fort Benton that a small band of Southern Indians, possibly Creeks or Choctaws, was observed passing through the Cypress Hills last month. No confirmation has been received from the military, and local traders deny any such visit." This brief newspaper mention, likely derived from missionary communication, introduces a public dimension to the event, illustrating how fragmentary information circulated without verification. In subsequent months, correspondence between regional officers continued to diverge. A letter from Captain George L. Evans of Fort Assiniboine to Colonel B.R. Miles, dated October 10, 1879, states, "In reference to alleged Creek Indians seen in the northern range during the summer, none have been encountered by our patrols. It is likely these were misidentified half-breeds or wandering Sioux. Recommend closure of inquiry." The notation, "Recommend closure of inquiry," was later repeated in the departmental index, effectively ending official interest. Yet within the missionary archives, an unsigned travel diary fragment, later identified as belonging to Sister Dubois' assistant, adds another small confirmation. "On the day of St. John, we saw smoke upon the hill beyond the second river. The soldiers said it was hunters, but the singing was soft and strange, not of the local tribes." No date accompanies this fragment, but context places it within the same July period. By 1880, the incident had disappeared from formal documentation, replaced by other administrative priorities. Nevertheless, the surviving discrepancies between McClintock's record, Farrell's military report, and Dubois' letter illustrate the layered complexity of frontier observation. A comparative reading of these documents reveals several factual divergences. Existence of the Camp McClintock and Dubois confirm presence. Farrell denies it. Temporal sequence. McClintock records habitation through June 25th. Farrell's inspection occurs July 2nd after the reported departure. Identification. McClintock explicitly names Creek affiliation. Farrell attributes remains to Sioux hunters. Dubois identifies Creek language. Disposition. McClintock records peaceful, stable settlement. Dubois describes transient migration. Farrell claims absence of settlement altogether. Each perspective arises from institutional position. The field agent tasked with documentation, the military officer ensuring territorial order, the missionary observing humanitarian encounters. Their purposes differ, and so do their conclusions. The administrative correspondence following these reports further reflects bureaucratic distance. An internal note in the BIA Consolidated File, 1879, reads, "Subject Creek Movement, Northern Territory. Conflicting field evidence. No further investigation deemed necessary. Files to remain in holding pending new reports." No new reports followed. In 1911, historian Eleanor Hayes, preparing her compilation Tribal Movements on the Northern Plains, revisited the surviving documents. Her analysis, based solely on available transcripts, commented on the divergence of sources. The McClintock journal, though brief, accords in tone with the Dubois letter, while Farrell's report contradicts both. The temporal lag of 1 week between McClintock's last entry and Farrell's reconnaissance sufficiently explains the discrepancy, yet federal indexes list only the military denial. Thus, the creek presence documented twice was erased administratively through preference for uniform testimony. Hayes's statement, while written decades later, highlights the process through which conflicting archival voices were reconciled by omission. The multiplicity of these records reveals not narrative tension, but institutional variance. Each document performs a distinct administrative function, and each function produces its own version of reality. The military seeks evidence of threat. The missionary records acts of charity. The field agent measures compliance. Between them, the event itself, the short-lived creek settlement, exists only as overlapping shadows within the bureaucratic ledger. Additional secondary documentation, though sparse, reinforces this fragmentation. A memorandum from the Canadian Northwest Mounted Police dated August 1879 mentions a group of foreign Indians reported near the international line, believed to be refugees from U.S. territory. No tribal identification is given. The note concludes tersely, no action required unless they enter settlement areas. This brief transnational reference suggests the possibility that the Creek families moved northward into Canadian territory following McClintock's final entry. However, no direct confirmation exists in either American or Canadian sources. By the time the annual report of the Commissioner of Indian Affairs for 1880 was published, no mention of Creek migration north of Indian Territory appeared. The incident's absence in national summaries completed its quiet removal from the public record. The later sections of the Field Journal of W.H. McClintock and related correspondence document the final phase of Creek presence in the Cypress region during the last week of June 1879. These entries and secondary reports written within a narrow time frame represent the most detailed surviving record of events before the encampment's disappearance. The Field Journal resumes with entry 6, dated June 22, 1879. Weather unsettled wind northwest. Camp quiet through morning. 2 men absent. Returned near dusk with venison. Reported hunting to the West Hills. 1 woman ailing, no medicine requested. Children observed drawing shapes in dust circles joined by lines. Interpreter says they call it marking the wind. A short annotation follows. Phrase translated by Wells as symbolic of direction or movement. No clear meaning given. The next paragraph records a brief conversation. Spoke again with Tassa regarding travel north. He said they might move east after the next moon. When asked where, he answered, where the sound stops. Interpreter uncertain. I made no further inquiry. A notation in smaller handwriting beneath reads, translation, literal not figurative. McClintock continues with simple enumeration. Supplies diminishing. No complaint made. Camp maintains order. Fires small. Children appear healthy. Horse condition improving with grass. The record then shifts to a longer descriptive passage covering the evening of the same date. At dusk, low, singing heard from the central fire. The melody consists of 3 notes repeated. Interpreter recognized word home este used in Creek dialect. Duration 10 minutes. Afterwards, silence. This observation is consistent with the interpreter's earlier notes on road songs. It reflects continuity of daily life without explicit indication of departure or distress. The following entry, June 23, 1879, is primarily logistical. Measured distance to nearest creek crossing 2 1/2 miles. Soil firm, water shallow. No recent tracks beyond those of camp horses. Marked coordinates for map reference. Temperature 73 degrees F at noon. McClintock's precision reveals his administrative intent verification of geography rather than ethnographic detail. He adds a concise statement at the end. No movement observed. Will remain 1 day longer. The subsequent page, June 24, 1879, introduces the first suggestion of transition. Weather clear. Morning activity as before. Men cutting poles, women packing materials in hides. Appears preparatory. No comment when asked. Interpreter reports word chico, meaning travel or path. The rest of the page lists measurements and notes. 12 lodges reduced to 10, 2 dismantled. Fires burning lower. 2 horses missing, likely strayed. One man left camp in early afternoon with rifle, not returned by sunset. No mention of alarm accompanies these details. The tone remains procedural. McClintock's next entry is the last full narrative account, June 25, 1879. At dawn, site empty. Lodges removed. Only ashes remain. Found one painted stone at central hearth, marked with spiral symbol in red pigment. Also found a small carved toy made of bone. One pole stood upright with a strip of red cloth attached. No tracks visible beyond short distance. Ground damp from rain. Wind south. This description, known as the final entry, concludes the field record. Below the paragraph, McClintock adds 2 administrative lines. Recommend closure of observation. Group peaceful departed without incident. Forwarding notes to Superintendent Porter for file. No subsequent entries appear in the notebook. The field journal's abrupt conclusion generated further correspondence between agency offices. In a letter dated July 10, 1879, Superintendent Hiram Porter acknowledged receipt of McClintock's report. Your observations regarding the Creek families near Cypress Hills are noted. As no disturbances have occurred and their departure appears voluntary, no pursuit or further record will be necessary. Retain copies for archive. Porter's reply, formal and concise, effectively ended administrative engagement with the matter. Meanwhile, interpreter John Wells submitted a separate memorandum preserved in Supplementary Record BE 1879. After departure of Agent McClintock returned to site on June 30th. Camp entirely gone. Found remains of fire pit covered with stones. Observed red pigment on one stone, same as previously described. Tracks, faint direction, uncertain. Local hunters said party moved north toward Milk River. He mentioned they traveled at night. Wells includes a note on linguistic observation. Spoke to one man of a Assiniboine band. He said strangers passed through 5 nights ago. He called them people who speak slow, not Sioux. They gave him meat and tobacco. This testimony, dated less than a week after McClintock's final entry, supports the hypothesis of gradual migration northward rather than disappearance or conflict. Another correspondence, unsigned, but believed to be from missionary sister Amélie Dubois, adds an independent observation from early July. Heard from Trader Lacroix that the southern Indians who rested near the Cypress Hills have gone toward the border. No harm done. They left a child's toy carved from bone found near the creek. He keeps it for memory. This detail precisely matches McClintock's note about the toy found at the abandoned site, confirming parallel discovery. An internal agency circular, Helena Record Office, August 1879, later summarized the incident under the heading Creek Movements Unverified. Field report by Agent McClintock acknowledged. Subsequent military inspection, Farrell found no remaining habitation. Interpreter confirms peaceful departure. No action required. This administrative summary, filed as entry 1879, C-14, became the official conclusion. No follow-up directives or cross-border inquiries were issued. A decade later, during archive consolidation, a brief marginal note was added in red ink by clerk Henry Mason, 1908. Reference Creek settlement near Cypress Range, reported 1879. Record incomplete. Original journal retained. No subsequent sightings. This annotation marks the end of the bureaucratic trail. In 1912, when Eleanor Hayes reviewed the full McClintock record for her publication, Tribal Movements on the Northern Plains, she transcribed the entries from the microfilm copy, inserting clarifying footnotes. Her remarks on the final phase are as follows. The McClintock journal concludes with no indication of violence or removal. His observation of packed lodges and reduced fires suggests voluntary departure. Wells's later memorandum affirms northward movement. The material evidence, ashes, poles, pigment, corresponds to short-term encampment. The red cloth and carved bone toy remain the only tangible remnants noted. Hayes also quotes directly from a bureau inventory prepared in 1880. No Creek Indians listed under northern agencies. No Creek individuals reported by military or missionary establishments. Census complete. The phrase census complete effectively erased the Cypress incident from the national record. A much later reference, dated April 1932, appears in the National Archives Microfilm Index M1012. It summarizes the case with similar brevity. Creek families observed near Cypress Hills, Montana Territory, 1879. Approximately 50 persons, reported by Agent McClintock. No subsequent record of location or status. By the 1930s, the episode existed only as a file heading within archival systems. The surviving textual body remained unchanged. From a factual standpoint, the cumulative documents identify the following verified sequence. Arrival first sighting, June 17, 1879, 12 lodges. Duration occupation through June 24. Gradual dismantling observed. Departure before dawn, June 25th, direction uncertain. Aftermath. No reports of conflict, pursuit, or return. Confirmation interpreter and missionary sources corroborate peaceful movement. The outcome of the migration remains undetermined. No evidence indicates integration into other tribes, capture, or repatriation. The families vanish from the written record without subsequent enumeration. A final memorandum from BIA clerk Joseph Warren, written in 1882 while closing out inactive files, summarizes the matter in one paragraph. Subject: Creek Encampment, Cypress Hills, 1879. Record consists of journal interpreter notes, one missionary letter. No additional correspondence. Conclude no standing action. Filed under completed matters. This administrative phrasing, completed matters, stands as the last official word concerning the Creek presence in the northern plains. In all surviving materials, there is no evidence of armed engagement, removal order, or recorded death. The event concludes in silence, a migration noted filed and left unresolved. From a historical documentation perspective, the consistency across the final phase of records demonstrates the procedure of 19th century bureaucracy: observation, report, filing, and closure. The Creek people of the Cypress Mountains pass through that procedure once briefly and are thereafter omitted from further mention. The absence of continuation in the record is not omission by censorship, but by administrative finality. The file met its procedural end. The data, dates, locations, and observations remain. The lives recorded within them do not reappear. The field journal of W.H. McClintock closes on a single page. The handwriting remains steady to the end, the graphite lighter than before. The date stands centered at the top margin, June 25, 1879. Below it, the first and final line of the last entry reads, "At dawn, the camp was gone." This sentence occupies its own line, separated by a small space before the continuation. The remainder of the page records in brief notations the immediate observations that follow. Ground damp. Fires extinguished. Only ashes and one stone remaining. The stone painted with red spiral mark. No sign of struggle or disorder. Below this, the next short paragraph appears. Found small carved object made of bone shape of animal. Near same place as main fire. Found one pole, still upright, piece of red cloth tied to end. No footprints beyond 50 paces. Rain during night erased surface marks. Each line follows the formal pattern of field reports: observation, followed by verification. McClintock continues. No trace of direction taken. 2 small depressions near creek, possibly where tents stood. Grass pressed flat, but already lifting. No refuse or abandoned material. The document then transitions into measurement and environmental detail, consistent with the structure of earlier entries. Temperature 61 degrees at sunrise. Wind south by east, clouds low. Light rain ceased before 0700 hours. The section marked findings lists 2 numbered items. Evidence of organized departure, all material removed. No indication of hostile contact or flight under duress. Following these points, the agent writes his formal recommendation in the tone of closure. Recommend closure of observation. Subject group: peaceful, departed voluntarily. No action required. He signs his name directly below: W.H. McClintock, Agent, Cypress District, June 25, 1879. A small circular marking in graphite appears under the signature, perhaps the beginning of another note, but no text follows. The page ends blank. The subsequent sheet in the bound volume contains only a header pre-printed on the field form, remarks, if any, left empty. In the official filing record at the Helena Federal Office, The entry was copied verbatim into the quarterly abstract of field journals. The transcription reads identically except for minor formatting changes. It concludes with the administrative notation, filed July 8, 1879. No continuation. The microfilm copy of the document confirms that the last physical page of the notebook remains intact, its lower right corner creased, but not torn. A later archivist's note written in 1908 by Henry Mason identifies the ending precisely. This is the final recorded line in the McClintock Journal. No supplementary pages found. The book ends here. The phrase, "the book ends here," appears again in the 1932 Microfilm Index under entry A1879 Series Final, followed by the archivist's initials CLF. Beyond McClintock's signature, no subsequent correspondence from him survives in bureau files. His next recorded activity in agency logs dates to October 1879, involving inspection of Crow settlements. The Cypress case is not mentioned. Interpreter John Wells submitted one short memorandum on June 30th, describing the empty site, but it adds no new data. His closing line reads, "Site now cold, stones still red, no voices." That memorandum, 2 sentences long, forms the last contemporaneous observation connected to the event. The silence that follows within the official record is uninterrupted for decades. Annual reports for 1879 and 1880 contain no reference to Creek migration. The military correspondence files cross-indexed by region mark the Cypress entry as closed without incident. When archivist Henry Mason cataloged the document in 1908, he attached a one-line description for internal reference. Brief journal describing encounter with Creek Indians near Cypress Mountains. Concludes abruptly with disappearance of party. No additional commentary or interpretation was entered. In 1912, historian Eleanor Hayes transcribed the journal for inclusion in tribal movements on the Northern Plains. Her transcription preserves the original punctuation and line breaks. The final page is reproduced as follows: June 25, 1879. At dawn, the camp was gone. Ground damp. Fires extinguished. Only ashes and one stone remaining marked with red spiral. Found carved toy of bone near fire. One pole still upright with red cloth. No tracks beyond 50 paces. Rain in night. No trace of direction. Recommend closure of observation. W.H. McClintock, agent. Hayes's commentary beneath the facsimile is brief. The absence of concluding narrative is consistent with official procedure of the period. Once a group left a region without incident reporting ceased. The remaining page thus forms a complete administrative conclusion. The Helena Record Office Ledger of Field Documents confirms this. The entry under McClintock's name carries the notation "Completed File." June 25, 1879. In government classification, the word "completed" implied that no additional action or investigation was necessary. The disappearance of the Creek families is therefore not described as loss or tragedy within the record, but as closure of procedure. The system's final act is documentation, not search. No return entry was ever filed. No later agent references the Cypress Hills camp in the subsequent 3-year cycle of regional inspection. By 1882, when McClintock's service concluded, the Cypress section of his ledger remained the only surviving entry concerning the Creek people in that territory. The Department of the Interior Annual Compilation of 1883 lists all Northern District matters concluded during the preceding decade. Among them appears a single line: Cypress Hills, observation of Indian camp, summer 1879, concluded peaceful departure. This bureaucratic sentence marks the last institutional acknowledgement of the event. During archival reclassification in the early 20th century, the document was microfilmed, cataloged, and stored without annotation. When the microfilm reel was inspected in 1932, archivist Charles Lefferts added a margin summary: record ends without resolution. No subsequent correspondence. This is the final page. Decades later, when the National Archives digitized the reel in 1964, an internal cataloger appended a metadata tag, "No continuation." Thus, the final entry of June 25, 1879. 27 words describing an empty camp stands as both the literal and archival conclusion of the Creek presence in the Cypress Mountains. The factual chain ends where the paper ends. The administrative act of closure becomes the historical boundary itself. Subsequent references to the McClintock record in secondary scholarship merely repeat those closing sentences. No new evidence has been added since the transcription of 1912. In the Northern Plains, Historical Collection Catalog of 1971, under the section Minor Tribal Movements, 1870-1880, the index entry reads, Creek families observed near Cypress Hills, June 1879. Last notation, June 25th, camp vacated. Record complete. No additional annotations, cross-references, or appended documents exist. The journal's final physical characteristics. The single line of handwriting, the blank half-page that follows the absence of concluding remarks, define the point at which written history stops. The file remains open only in the mechanical sense of archival preservation the document endures. The event itself does not resume. Every reproduction from Hayes's typescript in 1912 to the microfilm in 1932 to the digital transcript in 1964 repeats the same conclusion with no added information. Each iteration reinforces the absence. Where the handwriting ceases, the archive begins its long silence. The historical record does not proceed to speculation memory or oral account. It ends with procedure observation filed report transmitted subject departed. The language of the final page remains unaltered since its creation. The ink fades slightly at the lower margin, but the words remain legible. At dawn, the camp was gone. That single statement, administrative in form, complete in syntax, becomes the document's entire climax. Beyond it, the next page is empty, except for the pre-printed field header remarks. No remarks follow. In archival terms, this marks total completion. No signature, no revision, no correction. Only the closing weight of process written into silence. The field journal of W.H. McClintock remained in obscurity for nearly 3 decades after its last dated line in June 1879. The notebook was transferred along with other inactive agency materials to the Helena Federal Record Office in 1882, following McClintock's reassignment and subsequent retirement. There it was placed in a standard storage crate, labeled Cypress Agency Correspondence and Field Logs. For years, no one referenced it again. Its rediscovery occurred during the Department of the Interior reorganization of 1908, a nationwide archival consolidation designed to centralize fragmented territorial files. A junior clerk named Henry Mason, tasked with cataloging pre-1900 field materials, encountered the notebook while sorting unindexed boxes from the Helena facility. In his typed inventory sheet, he identified it simply as Journal Cypress Hills Creek Indians, 1879. Author W.H. McClintock. 9 pp. Pencil manuscript. Condition fair. Mason's note reintroduced the document to federal awareness. The same year, the Bureau authorized the creation of a new sub-series titled RG 75, A Tribal Movements Miscellaneous, under which the McClintock Journal was formally entered as File Number 1. 87942 BIAMC. This classification secured its preservation. In 1911, while researching unpublished government records on indigenous migration, historian Eleanor Hayes requested access to the file. She photographed and transcribed the notebook, producing a typescript that would later appear in her 1912 publication, Tribal Movements on the Northern Plains. Hayes's work represented the first academic citation of the document. In a footnote to Chapter 4, she wrote, "Among the minor records of Creek displacement is a journal kept by an Indian agent W.H. McClintock, detailing brief contact with a group in the Cypress Hills, June 1879. The report is factual and without commentary. It closes with the group's disappearance. Hayes's transcription was careful, though not exact. She regularized spelling and punctuation, but kept the structure intact. Her publication ensured that the McClintock record survived beyond bureaucratic storage. In 1932, the National Archives microfilmed the entire RG-75A collection as part of microfilm series M1012 Indian Affairs Field Records, Northern Territories, 1875-1883. The McClintock file occupied frames 418 through 426. The microfilm caption reads, "Creek Indians, observed by Agent McClintock near Cypress Hills, June 1879. No subsequent trace. This microfilm copy became the basis for later scholarly reference. During 1956, preservation staff at the Montana Historical Society Archives received the original notebook from the Department of the Interior as part of a transfer of territorial-era documents. The physical volume remains there today, stored in Box 12, Folder 7, Collection 1-87942, BIAMC. The binding is brittle, the pages yellowed but legible. A catalog entry prepared by archivist Margaret Lowe in 1957 describes its condition succinctly. Pencil faded paper thin. Text complete. Final page blank following signature. In 1964, the document underwent photographic reproduction during the early phase of the National Archives photo duplication program. A complete facsimile was distributed to selected university libraries under the title Creek Camp Cypress Mountains, 1879, the McClintock Field Journal. In 1971, the Northern Plains Historical Collection at the University of Montana published a verified transcript cross-checked against both the microfilm and Hayes's 1912 edition. This remains the standard academic reference used today. No further original materials relating to the Cypress Hills Creek families have been located. Neither U.S. nor Canadian archives contain subsequent references to their migration, settlement, or return. Military reports, census ledgers, and missionary correspondences for the years 1880-1885 remain silent on the subject. A single marginal note appears in the Fort Benton Mission Annual Report for 1881. No reappearance of the Southern Indian families observed 2 years past. No further information accompanies this sentence. Archaeological investigations conducted in the 1970s within the western sector of Cypress Hills Provincial Park, Saskatchewan, identified a series of shallow depressions and scattered pigment fragments consistent with short-term encampments. Field archaeologist Walter Steinberg, in his 1977 report, Prehistoric and Historic Occupation Sites of the Cypress Plateau, wrote, "The fire pit pattern and red ochre residue at Site C79 correspond closely with 19th century descriptions by McClintock of creek habitation. Attribution remains tentative. No definitive link was established, but the similarity in layout and material remains has been noted in multiple field studies since. Today, the McClintock notebook survives in 3 physical forms: the original manuscript in Helena, the 1932 microfilm copy preserved at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., the 1964 photographic facsimile held in academic libraries in Missoula, Norman, and Denver. Each version retains identical pagination and the same concluding sentence. At dawn, the camp was gone. The provenance of the record is therefore uninterrupted from 1879 to the present. Every archival generation, bureaucratic, historical, digital, has reproduced its ending without alteration. The unresolved questions remain factual rather than interpretive. The precise destination of the Creek families after June 25, 1879, is unknown. No tribal enrollment, census notation, or oral genealogy confirms their resettlement. Whether they crossed into Canada, rejoined Creek relatives farther south, or dispersed among neighboring groups cannot be established from existing evidence. The absence of subsequent documentation defines the case as complete within administrative logic, but incomplete within historical understanding. The file ends not through erasure, but through procedural sufficiency. The archive's silence is the final entry. When modern researchers encounter the journal, they confront that same conclusion, a record that fulfills its bureaucratic purpose yet leaves its human subject unresolved. It embodies the method and limitation of 19th century observation, accurate, finite, detached. The Helena Federal Record Index of 1980, when summarizing transferred materials, classifies the McClintock Journal under Minor Tribal Encounters, 1869-1880. The descriptive line reads, "Single observation of Creek migration beyond traditional territory." Record terminates abruptly. Historical significance, first evidence of post-war northward movement. This statement, factual and concise, represents the furthest interpretive reach allowed within official description. In 2005, during digitization of the M1012 microfilm series, the National Archives Metadata Division appended a standard summary for online catalogs. Contains one field journal documenting Creek Indians near Cypress Hills, Montana Territory, 1879. Disappearance unrecorded, condition stable. Nothing more has been added since. The file remains active in reference databases, but inactive in inquiry. As of today, the McClintock record stands as one of the few surviving written attestations of Creek movement beyond the recognized boundaries of Indian Territory. It has been cited in fewer than a dozen academic publications, each relying on the same 9 pages of text. Its endurance is administrative, its meaning cumulative through repetition. For archivists, the document illustrates continuity of custody. For historians, it demonstrates the margin of observation where human events pass beyond documentation. The record has traveled further in paper than its subjects did in life, moved from camp to office to archive to film to digital file, while the people it described remain untraced. No memorial inscription or oral continuity names them in the region today. Only the written line remains preserved across generations of transcription. At dawn, the camp was gone. Within archival systems, that sentence functions as both evidence and ending. Its survival confirms not presence, but procedure. The document's completeness lies not in narrative, but in endurance. And in that endurance, the quiet persistence of a bureaucratic sentence across nearly 150 years, the boundaries of what history records become visible. The field journal does not explain disappearance. It documents observation. What followed was never written. The file labeled and stored now occupies a space within a climate-controlled cabinet reference code, unchanged since 1879. It will remain accessible to future researchers under the same number, awaiting rereading, recataloguing, reinterpretation. Each time it is opened, the silence following its final line repeats itself. That silence is not absence of information. It is the continuation of record-keeping, where the voice of the archive becomes the only surviving witness to what once stood in the Cypress Hills. And perhaps that is the enduring trace of all such documents, not the fullness of what they capture, but the measured space between the last written word and everything that remains unrecorded.